Nera rubbed her manipulating appendages together excitedly as she skittered down the halls of the space station, her sectoid legs making soft tip taps on the stainless steel floor. Her large emerald compound eyes absorbed the surroundings as she dodged another Krier, their lobster-like abdomen scraping against the walls. The Krier raised their mantis-like bladed arms in annoyance, but Nera only wiggled her antennae in apology before hurrying away. The new species was here to review her work, and she had to be prepared. Her mandibles clicked together as she thought about these newcomers. Unlike the Vero, they were mammalian, but much smaller, with their furry heads barely reaching her people's lower stomach, right at the center of her grasping appendages. Yet they were rumored to be so dense that even a warrior couldn't budge them, despite their small stature. This was perplexing until she learned they hailed from a Category 13 death world with 4.5 times the gravity of her own home planet, the highest rating any planet harboring sentient life had ever received. The Noah, hailing from a Category 8 death world, were still relatively normal by comparison. One of Nera's colleagues had mentioned that Noah scientists claimed if their gravity were any higher, they would not have made it off their planet, and leaving the atmosphere was already a significant challenge. But the strangest thing about these newcomers wasn't their size or density. Nera had managed to get her manipulators on a pamphlet describing their anatomy, a rare document shared reluctantly among the galactic community only after many rotations. Their anatomy was overbuilt, to say the least. They had one head, a common trait, but their brain was split into two hemispheres. Their eyes, though 2 in number, had 6 muscles each to move the irises. Their respiratory system was bizarre. They moved oxygen around their bodies with organs called lungs, fleshy sacs that expanded and diffused oxygen into an iron-based bloodstream, which required much less oxygen than the Krier and many other species. Their atmosphere contained only 21% oxygen minus 20% less than anyone else. This information made Nera's elongated head spin. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, she arrived at the red airlock where she was to meet the newcomers. She could ponder their crazy anatomy later. For now, she needed to focus on presenting her work. She was proud of it and hoped it would impress the newcomers. V should be nearly done showing them the lab, she thought as she clacked her mandibles together loudly, drawing the attention of their guests. Bri turned first, her 9 eyes facing in all directions atop her fuzzy body. The humans Nera thought that was what they were called turned afterward and immediately jumped backward, their eyes dilating to pinpoints. One of them, who had a thick bar of fur above their mouth and stark white hair smoothed back, placed an appendage at their hip, searching for something that wasn't there. "It's a xenomorph," one of them whispered in a gruff voice that didn't translate well through the translate well. Another human, younger and wearing a green suit, turned entirely white, his hairless face adorned with bright gold fur, muttering to his companion, "Listen, if I get face hugged, shoot me, just shoot me, just shoot me." The one in green, who had turned pale, was reassured by the one in gray, whose face had turned a more pinkish hue. Nera tilted her head, confused, and slowly clicked at them, swiveling her elongated head almost entirely around before looking back. "I do not know what a xenomorph is," she stated simply, her antennae twitching in curiosity. "I don't see anyone in the vicinity other than myself and my colleague." The human's chest rose and fell slowly as they examined her more closely. The older human with the fur above his mouth studied her with predatory eyes, making her antennae stand on end. It wasn't a good sensation, and she was relieved when it ended. "You're right. I apologize," the older human said, stroking the fur above his lip. "You look very similar to a monster from one of our old horror movies, but you're very different." Nera rubbed her striking appendages together as she took several steps forward, towering over the humans. The young one in the green suit turned an even paler shade, retreating several steps. It was strange. He could probably rip off her legs easily. "How so?" she asked. "I don't want this to impact the demonstration. If I can alleviate any misunderstanding, I will." The older human seemed calmer now, stroking the hair above his lip and looking up at her. "Well, to start, your head is tubular, which is very much like said species. Nothing you can do about that. Then there's your back. You have biomechanical tubes poking out at about the right spots, and your carapace is nearly pitch black." He counted off each similarity on his fingers, which made the white-faced human tremble harder. "But you have mantis-like arms above your grasping appendages, and a more lobster-like lower half, as well as large mandibles over your mouth, and you have eyes, which they don't have." The older human turned to his companions and snapped, "So, my colleagues need to calm down and shape up." The younger one snapped to attention, and the older one turned back to Nera, extending an appendage toward her. I'm sorry about our conduct. It was a knee-jerk reaction. We were briefed on who we would be meeting, but in all honesty, I wasn't paying much attention to anything other than the mention of stealth ships. He made a strange chuffing sound, looking up at her, seemingly waiting for something. Nera looked down at his extended appendage, puzzled. "What are you doing with your appendage?" she asked, pointing to it with her own manipulators. The human looked down at his hand, then back up at her, keeping it extended. "It's a handshake," he explained, a formal greeting from my species. He gently took her manipulator in his hand and moved it up and down. Nera mimicked the movement, then retracted her appendage, antennae twitching. "Interesting. Well, I'm Nera, the head scientist of research and development here at the station. You're here for a demonstration of our newest stealth technology, aren't you?" she clicked coyly. The older human's eyes narrowed as the two younger ones smoothed their suits, the one in green no longer pale, and the one in gray a more pinkish hue. "Yes, we are." "Strange way to jump into the conversation," he growled. The translator still struggled to capture his tone. "Don't be a grumpy bastard," Todd, the one in green, interrupted bluntly. "She's a scientist, not a door-to-door salesman. The eggheads at home are just as awkward." Nera stored the name Todd in her memory. She was fascinated by these humans and wanted to study them all day, but she needed to proceed with the demonstration. "Thank you, Todd. We've worked on quite a few things for these ships, like the new propulsion system." She tapped her appendage on her datapad, connecting her communicator to one of the ships outside. "Please move 30 cricks up at full speed," she commanded. The furthest ship on the left rotated its back end downward, then shot upward, reaching 30 cricks in just a few minutes. Todd made a noise that the translator struggled to interpret. Nera turned to him, her mandibles rubbing together as the ship came to a stop. "We've improved the movement speed, shortening the time from 8 time units to 6. It was a lot of work. The gravitational force on the pilots was harsh until V used her knowledge to improve the dampeners." Jeremy, the one in green, looked at Todd, who remained silent, then at Walter, who was biting his lip. "You can't be serious," Jeremy said in disbelief. "What do you mean?" Nera asked, her emerald eyes shimmering. "This isn't fast. It was like watching your ships move through molasses." "Our ships would fly," Jeremy muttered. Todd smacked Jeremy on the back of the head, harder this time, making a sharp sound that even made Nera flinch. Jeremy hit the ground hard, groaning. "Don't be an ass," Todd grunted, then cleared his throat and nodded at Nera to continue. She was picking up on cues better now, she hoped. "Well," she clicked, pushing the button on her datapad again. The buzz emanated from it as she connected to another ship. "We have our new plasma cannons," she announced proudly. The next ship in line lowered a long barrel from its underside, a bright rainbow light shooting forward and smashing into a small asteroid 10 cricks wide. The asteroid became red-hot slag, flaking off and burning up as it entered the atmosphere of the planet below. "Well, that was pretty cool," Walter said in a tight voice, nodding to himself as the barrel folded back into the ship. "What, no encore?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Nera gave him a disbelieving look, her mandibles spreading apart. "No, they need time to recharge. They use quite a bit of energy, and using them too fast could melt your own ship," she explained, pointing to the slightly burned plating on the ship's underside. "Really?" Jeremy commented sarcastically, but a scowl from Todd shut him up quickly. Walter jumped in to continue where Jeremy left off. "That's it. We could have blown that asteroid to smithereens with our ship, and it's a diplomatic vessel," he said, but Todd smacked him on the back of the head too, seemingly a habit of his. These three must be very familiar with each other if they were comfortable showing off their strength and willingness to use force in front of her. "If you say another word, I'm going to wax your entire body and make you go to your wedding that way," Todd muttered. Walter turned pale, his bravado disappearing as he spluttered, "You wouldn't." Todd's face was deadly serious, and Walter quickly fell silent as Todd gestured for Nera to continue. She was starting to think nothing was going to impress them except, perhaps, the stealth modules. "I suppose we should continue," she clicked, pushing the communications button again. This time, the next ship's wings folded in on themselves until it was nothing but a spearhead floating in space. In a flash of light, the silvery form stretched like a rubber band until it disappeared, leaving only a puff of silvery gas behind. "Was that an FTL jump?" "I thought you couldn't jump that close because of the warp bubble," Walter asked, his eyes wide. Jeremy and even Todd seemed impressed, their faces contorting into expressions Nera hadn't seen before. Yes, that was the reaction Nera had been looking for, It was gloriously fascinating to examine their faces. "You are correct," Nera responded, her antennae waving up and down happily. The warp bubbles usually would rip the ship apart if you were using any other FTL drive, but implementing some of the same principles as our grav generator, we've managed to make short-distance jumps not only possible but cost-effective. She tapped something into her datapad, and a silvery shard flashed by the station. The ship that had just vanished reappeared a few six away from one of the others, its wings folding back out as it maneuvered into place. Another puff of silvery gas marked its reappearance. "That's actually amazing. We've been looking for something like that." The higher-ups have been complaining about needing to be halfway to the Kuiper belt before jumping out, wherein Todd commented, his blue eyes gleaming with interest. Nera's antennae waved happily as she rubbed her manipulating appendages together, a soft S emanating from them as her carapace rubbed together. She had thought the plasma cannon would have been their favorite so far, but this was wonderful. "Yes, we are also looking for a solution to that problem. I'm happy to have finally caught your interest. I suppose we should get on to the main show then." She clicked excitedly, sliding her appendage across the datapad. The ships outside shimmered as their stealth modules powered up, slowly vanishing from view, front to back, until they were completely invisible. "So, when were you going to activate the module?" "The ships got pretty flashy there for a moment," Todd asked, shattering Nera's train of thought. She looked at Todd, a merry look on his face as he stared out the window. No, they couldn't see them. It shouldn't be possible, she thought, panic rising in her chest. "Yeah, I can kind of see a slight shimmer around the ships now, though. Maybe they're powering up. Makes sense. Probably draws a lot of power or is heavy on the onboard computers," Jeremy commented. He leaned toward Walter, who was also staring out the window, nodding in agreement. "I don't know, but yeah, I see it too, kind of like a thin layer of glass that's wobbling around the body." "Kind of cool looking," Walter answered. Nera was in disbelief. The camouflage had been perfect. No high-yield scanning equipment had spotted the ships during tests. "You must be playing a prank on me," she clacked shakily, barely getting the words past her mandibles. "What?" "No, they're right there." "You've got to be kidding me," Todd said in disbelief, pointing out the window. Nera slowly typed into her datapad, her hands trembling. Todd's face frowned as his fingers slowly raised upward, following something she couldn't see. "Doctor, please, we aren't fools." "They're right there," Jeremy added, pointing at the same spot. Nera's head was spinning, her carapace tightening as she collapsed onto the floor. She leaned against the cold wall, looking at the three humans standing in front of her. "The stealth modules are active," she said weakly, holding up the datapad to show the status of the ships. She pointed to the green slider with a trembling appendage. The humans stared at the screen, their faces reflecting a mix of disbelief and frustration. No, there's no way. You're messing with us, aren't you?" Jeremy stated furiously, throwing his hands up in the air. He scowled deeply, looking remarkably like Todd with the same furrowed brows. "You're messing with us. There's no way your stealth amounts to a shiny ship with a kind of cool shimmer. There's no way I'm missing battle bots for this." He ranted as Nera slowly turned the sliders down. Todd and Walter watched intently as the ships gradually came back into view, their shimmering hulls once again visible. Nera watched in despair as her magnificent ships hung in the void above the planet, shimmering like silver birds. "I think she's serious," Walter said, shaking Jeremy's shoulders roughly. Nera watched the muscles flex and move under the skin, momentarily distracted by the strange movement as she tried to reconcile with the information. Her work for the past few rotations was useless. The humans saw the ships just as clearly as when the modules were off. "You shouldn't be able to see them at all," she muttered, checking her datapad again. "We reduced the wavelength of light that reflects off the surface of our ships to the 450 nanocric range. No one should be able to see them." Todd gave her a comforting look before clapping his hands together. "All right, boys, so the stealth modules are a bust." "There was always a chance they were going to be," he said, nodding to the others, who turned to look at him. Todd gestured out the window, smiling slightly. "That FTL jump tech, though it would make us far more difficult to hit, track, hell, it would even give us an upper hand against 90% of the galaxy." The other two humans tilted their heads, considering his words. "But Todd, we came here for stealth tech. What are we going to tell the big wigs at home?" "Oops, sorry guys. Turns out we just have way too good eyesight. Their stealth sucks." "Oh yeah, but see this FTL drive," Jeremy protested. Todd nodded, his expression firm. "That's exactly what we tell them. They've been looking for a better FTL drive anyway. So the stealth drive sucks, boo-hoo. Since when have we ever had luck in our favor? The others smirked, their frustration fading into amusement. As they began barking together laughter, Nera realized. She was going to assume it was laughter otherwise. These humans had just gone insane in front of her, which would be very bad news. Well, shall we head to the negotiations chamber? Then Nera clicked weakly. The three humans nodded at each other, helping her to her many legs. Lead the way, Doctor. I'm sure we can work something out. Months later, General Crana had not believed Nera's report, calling her a liar and a traitor. There was no way the ships that had made her so proud could be so utterly useless against their greatest threat. She tried to explain that the human visual spectrum was so much wider than theirs that reducing the wavelength as she had done would not inhibit them. But Crana had screeched in her face, accusing her of lying. The entire galactic community couldn't see those ships, how could the humans? He forced her to resign, ordered a personal ship to be built, and went to prove her a fool. Confident in his stealth, he warped to the edge of Sol's space, determined to sneak past their detection methods from the very edge of their home system. His confidence remained as he passed Neptune without resistance, sending gloating messages back to the Career Council, constantly berating Nera's report. He ignored the fact that she had spent many rotations developing the stealth module, giving her no reason to lie. As he approached Jupiter, however, he began to feel uneasy, sensing that he was being watched. He could see slight shimmers at the edge of his vision, almost imperceptible, as he grew closer to the gas giant. There was much more activity here, including a large metal ring slowly rotating around one of its moons. Then, without warning, his ship was promptly obliterated in a hail of explosions, reduced to shrapnel floating in Sol's space. The last words he heard, moments before his death, were, "We see you." If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.